Masechet Avoda Zara, Daf Yod Gimel. We mentioned yesterday the Mishnah that if there is a city that has stores and some of them are adorned and some of them are not adorned with various flowers like roses and myrtles. So there was a situation just like that in Bet She'an, and the sages there ruled that if it is adorned with myrtles and roses, then one is prohibited from buying anything from those stores because the myrtles and roses show that that store is owned by idol worshippers, and therefore one is benefiting the idol worshippers by giving them money and patronizing their store. However, if it is not decorated, then that guy is not an idol worshipper. That seems to be the simple meaning of the Mishnah. But now let's see two opinions in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish lo shanu ela meutarot bevered vehadas teka mitane merecha v'meutarot beperot mutarot. Resh Lakish says that the prohibition in the Mishnah is only if the store is decorated with roses and myrtles, because one benefits from them because they smell nice. And so by going to the store, you are smelling these roses and myrtles, which were used for Avoda Zara, and therefore benefiting from Avoda Zara, which is prohibited. However, if it is decorated with fruit that doesn't have a fragrance, then it's permitted. Notice as a tangent that the words Deka mitane merecha are in Aramaic, even though the rest of Resh Lakish's words are in Hebrew, meaning that these three words, Deka mitane merecha, seem like they are a later commentary on the words of Resh Lakish. And it could be that originally what he meant was that the roses and myrtles, that's how they showed their worship. That's what they used to worship, like in various things regarding Dionysus. But with other decorations that might not be an indication of idolatry. And so he knows the difference between decorations that are for this idol or decorations that are not for idolatry. In any case, the Gemara is understanding Resh Lakish as being a problem of getting benefit from it. And that's why it's not allowed. And what's Rabbi Resh Lakish's source? That one is not permitted to benefit from idolatry, but you can give a benefit to idolatry, because when you're buying from the store, you're giving the guy money. And it's still decorated with other things. They just don't happen to smell. And so you're giving the guy money and giving him benefit. So how do you know that you cannot get benefit from idolatry, but you can give benefit from the pasuk that says, there shall not cleave anything dedicated to your hand. In other words, something dedicated to idol worship, you cannot take in your hand. Take in your hand meaning to benefit. So benefiting from idolatry is prohibited. But giving benefit is permitted, and that's the lenient opinion of Resh Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says that understands the Mishnah differently, and when the Mishnah says decorated, doesn't say in the Mishnah decorated with what, just says decorated. So he says decorated with anything. That the fact that it's decorated shows that they are participating in some idolatrous service, and therefore one is prohibited, even though it doesn't smell and you're not getting benefit. But if you're going there and patronizing the store, then you're giving benefit. And he says that we learn from a Kal Vachomer, if you cannot derive benefit from idolatry, all the more so you cannot give benefit to idolatry, and therefore you're not allowed to go to the store even if there's no fragrance, because you will benefit him by giving him business, by giving him money. Metibe. Now, a challenge against Resh Lakish from a Baraita. Rabbi Natan Omer, Yom she'avoda zara manachat bo et hameches, machrizin v'omrim, kol mi shenotel atara v'yaniach ברושו בראש חמורו, לכבוד עבודה זרה, יניח לו את המכס, ואם לאו, אל יניח לו את המכס. Braita teaches that, in the opinion of Rabbi Natan, when there is a day of a holiday for Avodah Zarah, the priests would announce that they're going to lower the tax in honor of the holiday. The idolatrous priests would usually collect the tax. and they would announce as follows: anyone who takes this wreath of roses and would put it on his head and on the head of his donkey in honor of the idol, they will get a reduction in taxes, because they show, look, they're adorning themselves and their animal in honor of Avoda Zara. So by participating, they deserve a reduction. But if they do not if you refuse to put the wreath on themselves and on the donkey's head, then they will not get a reduction in tax. Now, if there's a Jew that's in that place, what should he do? He has a dilemma. Yaniach nimsa neheneh. Lo yaniach nimsa mehaneh. If he puts the wreath on his head, he's going to be benefiting from it because they smell nice. The wreath of roses smell nice, and he's going to be benefiting from that fragrance, and that's a problem. And if he does not put it on, then he will be giving benefit to the idol worship because he's paying more tax, and that money is going to the idolatrous priests, and thereby he is giving benefit. So you see that according to this baraita, one is prohibited both from receiving benefit and from giving benefit, which is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, but a challenge against Resh Lakish. Before we answer it, we're going to continue and explain the entire baraita. Mikan amiru hanoseh v'noten beshuk shel avodah zara behemat te'aker perot kesut v'chelim yerakebu maot uchle matachot yolichem liyam hamelech. If someone buys and sells in a shuk of avodah zara, in a market of idolatry, if he buys an animal, so he's not allowed to benefit from it, and it has to be uprooted or unhoofed in some way. The animal has to be made unusable. And if he buys produce or clothing or other vessels, they have to be left to decompose. And if it's money or metal items, then that will not decompose, then he has to throw it into the Dead Sea so that no one can salvage it and no one will get benefit from it. Now, what does that mean? That it should be destroyed regarding the animal. One cuts off the hooves from below the knee. The animal will stay alive, but it will be completely unusable. Okay, that's the end of the braita that shows, in this part, we're going to get back to this part, that shows you cannot get any benefit from something that you buy from idolatry. But the main question is from this part that says, if you leave the wreath on your head, you will benefit. So everybody agrees you can't benefit from idolatry. But here's the thing: if you do not, and you pay extra money in tax, then you are giving benefit. So clearly, one is not allowed to give money and give benefit to idolatry. Challenge against Resh Lakish. Amar Rabbi Shashia b'red Rav Idi, Kasabar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish pligi Rabbanan aleh de Rabbi Natan, ve'ana damari ke Rabbanan de pligi aleh, Rabbi Yochanan sabar la pligi. So Rabbi Shashia, the son of Rav Idi, explains that according to Resh Lakish, there's a machloket between various Tanaim, and there's another group of Rabbanan who disagree with Rabbi Natan. That baraita that we just said is Rabbi Natan, and Resh Lakish can say, I follow Rabbanan who are against Rabbi Natan. And Rabbi Yochanan, he thinks that there is no machloket, and everyone agrees. Rabbi Natan and Chachamim all agree regarding the stringent opinion. So, Rabbi Natan expressed a stringent opinion. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Natan, in that baraita above, represents everyone. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan said what he said. But Shakish can easily say that this baraita is only the stringent opinion of Rabbi Natan, who says both ways are no good. But Rabbanan would say that one cannot benefit from idolatry, but you can give benefit to idolatry. Now we ask about this interpretation according to Rabbi Yochanan. Vela pilige, is that really true that there are no sages that disagree with Rabbi Natan? Now we have a second baraita of Hatanya. Holchin liyarid shel goyim velochin mehem behema abadim ushvachot batim v'sadot uchramim v'chotev u'ma'aleh be'arkaot shelahen mipnei shehu kemasil miyadam. The baraita is very lenient and says one can go to a fair, a market of Gentiles, where there is idol worship, and you can buy animals and slaves and maidservants. The Gemara on Amud Bet will talk about what kinds these are and why. And you can also buy houses and fields and vineyards that are in Eretz Yisrael, because by doing so, one is redeeming them and having them join the property and be owned by the Jewish people. And so that is a mitzvah. So even though you have to do business with these idolaters, but it's for the purpose of a mitzvah to have the land of Israel in the hands of Jewish people, and these other items also to have them in the hands of Jewish people. So this is a good thing. And not only are you allowed to buy it from them, you can even write up documents and go to non-Jewish courts. Generally, you shouldn't use non-Jewish courts. Go use a Jewish bet din. But here you can, because you want to solidify the sale. If you don't have a deed that's from one of their recognized courts, then they might come after and says, no, I never sold it to you. Where's the proof? So you want proof that will be upheld in their court so that they cannot take it back. And so that's part of the mitzvah, matzil miyadam, of rescuing this property and this land from their hands. So just from that, we can already see that one is permitted to give benefit, right, to go and buy things from these marketplaces. And so you see that there is another opinion of Rabbanan that is more lenient than Rabbi Natan, and would be in accordance with Resh Lakish. And so how come Rabbi Yochanan would say that, and there's nobody that disagrees with Rabbi Natan? Okay, that's the question, but let's finish the entire baraita. It goes on for a little. If the person who's buying this land or stuff happens to be a kohen, he's allowed to go outside of Eretz Yisrael and become tameh. Now, technically, a kohen cannot go to a cemetery or be near next to a dead body, touch it or be on top of it. But the rabbis added another gezerah, and they said that all of the land outside of Eretz Yisrael is tameh, either because people are not careful to mark graves there, or just because of general lower morality that's outside the land of Israel. And so Kohanim should maintain a special status and generally may not go outside the land of Israel. However, this is for an important purpose. So if they need to go outside the land of Israel in order to litigate or contest their claims to land or property, then they can go and do that. And not just like they can go outside the land of Israel, they can go to a cemetery. If they need to go to a cemetery for legal reasons to retrieve property from non-Jews, they can do that. The Gemara interrupts the Baraita and asks, really? They can go to a cemetery? That tum'ah is from Torah law. So we only said that they can violate the Rabbanan status of outside the land of Israel. They can go against the Torah law to, I understand, redeeming property is important, but to go against the Torah law, that sounds like a big step. Ella beta pedas Rabbanan. No, we don't mean an actual cemetery where we know for sure that there are bodies, but rather a beta pedas, which is a place where we know that there was a grave, probably a grave somewhere here, but it was plowed over and the bones are scattered, and so they might be very small, they might be underneath, they might not be around, and therefore it's only a safek. So only midrabanan we say that Kohanim should not walk there, but probably there are no cemeteries, still bones intact there. So the rabbis made a gezerah, but midoraita is not a problem. So that's what it means when we say beta kebarot. Okay, back to the braita. A Kohen is also allowed to make himself tameh by going outside the land of Israel in order to learn Torah or to get married. If the woman of his dreams is outside the land of Israel, he's allowed to go outside to go get her. Rabbi Yehuda is a little more stringent and says, when can he go out to learn Torah? Only if he cannot find a place to learn Torah in Israel. There's no good schools there. But if he can find a place to learn in Israel, and there's places, there's yeshivot in Bavel, there's yeshivot in Israel. So don't leave, don't go to Bavel, and he should not become tameh, he should remain in Israel. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yosef Omer, afilu bizman shemoseh lelmod yitameh, lefi she'en adam zocheh lelmod mikol. Rabbi Yosef says, even if there are places, there are schools also in Israel, but the school that's outside the land of Israel, he likes the teachers there better, then he should go, because a person does not merit to learn from everyone. Everybody has their particular style, and way of learning. And so if he's going to learn better from the teachers outside the land of Israel, even though there are schools in Israel, he's allowed to go out. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Ma'aseh Yosef HaKohen Shalach Achad Abo L'Sidon L'Mod Torah. Rabbi Yosef says, in fact, there was such a case. He's backing up his own opinion of Yosef, who was a Kohen, and he followed his teacher. When his teacher moved to Sidon, which is outside the land of Israel, he followed him because that was his teacher. Yeah, he could have switched teachers to someone else in Israel, but that would not have been most beneficial to his learning. Now, Rabbi Yochanan clearly knows this baraita because he said the halacha is like Rabbi Yosef. So now we see that Rabbi Natan is not the only opinion. In fact, what we said over here, Rabbi Shashia said that Rabbi Resh Lakish is following the majority opinion of rabbis against Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Yochanan should also agree that there is a majority opinion that's against Rabbi Natan. So why didn't he follow the majority opinion? Alma Pelige, see that the majority of sages, in fact, are more lenient than Rabbi Natan. Amalach Rabbi Yochanan leolam la pelige. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, in fact, I could say that both of these baraitot are agreeing with each other. There's no disagreement here, and Rabbi Natan and all the rabbis would agree with both baraitot. How could you say that? Belakasha kan belokach min hatagad deshakle michsa mineh kan belokach mibal habayit la shakli michsa mineh. The first baraita that was said by Rabbi Natan, but is equally the opinion of all the rabbis, that's when one is buying from a merchant. And when you buy something from a merchant, the merchant has to pay sales tax to the idol worshippers. So if you're buying from the merchant, then some of your money is in fact going to idolatry, and so that's very bad. That's why it's not allowed. However, the second baraita that says it's permitted to buy things, and it's good because you're actually redeeming the property and getting it into Jewish hands. That's when you're buying from an individual, from a homeowner. When you just buy something from a homeowner, there's no taxes that go to the authority, to the idolatrous authorities. And since part of your money is not going to idolatrous taxes, that's why it's permitted. So in fact, there's no machloket. They're just talking about two different cases. Amar Mor, behema te'aker, va'ikasar ba'alei chayim. Now back to that baraita that is said, an animal has to be uprooted or destroyed by having its hooves removed or even the bottom of its leg removed. How could you do that? Isn't there suffering to animals? So Abaye says, well, yes, true, there is suffering to animals, but in some circumstances it's permitted. This is a pasuk from Yoshua where there's a fight with one of the Canaanite nations, and Hashem says you have to destroy their horses, not to have any benefit from them. And so you're going to destroy the horses, although that will be suffering to the animals. Well, it's for important benefit of not showing that we're not doing this in order to take their stuff, but in order not to be influenced by them. And so that's an important point, that political point that we need to make. And it's too bad that the animals need to suffer. So it's true, Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim is an important concern, but sometimes there are overriding concerns. Amar Mor ve'ezehu ikur menasher parsoteh min al kuba ulemata. Now we go back to the statement where we asked, what does it mean to uproot an animal? It means that one cuts off the hooves somewhere below the knee. Now, is that really how you do it? Urmin hi en maktishin ve'en machrimin ve'en ma'arichin bezeman hazeh v'miktish ve'hecherim ve'arich behema te'aker perot kesut ve'chelim yerakebu ma'ot ve'uchlim matachot yolichem liyam ha'melech melach ve'ezu ikur no'el delet befaneha ve'hi meta me'eleha. We have in this baraita says one should not make something sanctified or dedicate something or make an evaluation by an oath and say he's going to make this consecrated to the Bet HaMikdash nowadays, because there is no Bet HaMikdash. And now what are you going to do with it? So you're making something consecrated and then you can't actually give it to the Bet HaMikdash. And so don't make anything holy nowadays. And if you did, now you have a problem because you have this holy item and you can't give it to the Bet HaMikdash and you can't benefit from it. And if you leave it around, then it's likely that someone eventually will forget that it was consecrated and get benefit from it, and that will be a sin. So if someone did consecrate or dedicate or evaluate something, If it's an animal, then you should do this ikur. We'll see what that means according to this baraita. And if it is produce or garments or vessels, then let them just decompose. And if it's something made out of metal, like coins or metal vessels, then take it to the Dead Sea so that it's irretrievable. And then the baraita asks, and what does that mean? Ikur, uprooting an animal, that you lock it in a room and lock the door in front of it, and it will die on its own. It will die from hunger. So we see now a contradiction. Beforehand, the baraita said that ikur means that you cut off its hooves, and here it says you let it die of hunger. So which one is it? So Abaya explains that this baraita is different because it's talking about things that are made consecrated. Now this would be a disgrace to take a consecrated animal and cut off the bottom of its legs, to cut off its hooves. Not nice to treat an animal like that. Not that it's so much better to let it die of hunger, but that's more passive. You're just not feeding it and it's dying on its own. But here, to take a consecrated animal and to chop off its hooves, so one cannot treat consecrated animals in that way. However, the Baraita above was talking about animals that were used for idolatry or bought from idolaters. There, the animal is not consecrated, but you can't get any benefit from it. But there's no problem of the bizayon, of degradations, because it's not a holy animal, and so those, one can cut off the hooves. It won't kill it, at least not right away. It won't have a very good quality of life, but at least you don't have to starve it to death. Okay, well now we ask, why do you have to let it suffer and starve to death? How about just do shechita on it, and that's it, it'll be dead. Atu behu lideh takala. Now that a mishap will happen because people won't realize, might forget, and then they might eat it, but it's a consecrated animal which is not allowed to be eaten. Why not cut it? Just cut it in two. Don't do shechita in a kosher way. Just cut it up in a way that is not kosher shechita. So then nobody will eat it. Amar Abaye Amar Kera v'nitastem et mizbechotam ve'gomer lo tasun ken ladonai Elohechem. Abaye says, no, the pasuk says you shall break down their altars and destroy everything of Avoda Zara, but don't do that to Hashem. And so this would be a degradation to take an animal that is consecrated and just mutilate it and cut it up in a disgraceful way. That's one should do that to idolatry, but one should not do that to something consecrated to Hashem. And therefore, we cannot actively destroy it or kill it because it's a consecrated animal, and that's why we do it passively by just locking it up and not feeding it. Rava Amar mum bakodashim. Rava has a different reason. It's because it looks like you are inflicting a blemish on a sacrificial animal if you would cut it up. Now we ask about Rava. Nid'eh mum ma'al yahu. What do you mean it looks like you're giving a blemish? You are actually are making a blemish if you would cut it up in such a way. Hanemi lebizman shebet hamikdash kayam dechaze lahakraba hashta delachaze lahakraba letlan ba. And the answer is that the prohibition of adding a mum, a blemish, onto a sacrificial animal only applies mideoraita when the Bet HaMikdash is standing. Then you can't go take an animal and put a blemish in it because it can be sacrificed. However, nowadays when there is no Bet HaMikdash and the animal cannot be sacrificed, so mideoraita there is no prohibition of adding a blemish to a sacrificial animal. And therefore, Rava is saying, oh, this is nir'eh, it's like it. So it's a prohibition midrabanan of doing something that looks like it's the same. In fact, midoraita, it's not sacrificable because there is no Bet HaMikdash, there's no doraita problem, but that's why it says nir'eh kematil, but it's a consecrated animal, and therefore it's not appropriate to mutilate it, or because that would be adding a blemish to an animal that, if the Bet HaMikdash was up, could be sacrificed. Hold on, why not say it is actually prohibited? Because there is a prohibition, official prohibition, to add a blemish to an animal that already has a blemish. In the time of the Bet HaMikdash, they had a sacrificial animal and it got a blemish. Can you go add another blemish? Because it can't be sacrificed anyway. And the answer is no. And so even though it can't be sacrificed, still you cannot put a blemish. So how come Rava is saying nir'eh ke? Why not attach it to the oraita law of adding a blemish to something that already is not sacrificable? Daf agav dela. chazeh lakrebe asur, even though it cannot be sacrificed, still is prohibited from adding a blemish. So why didn't he say in that way? And the answer is ba'amum nehi de la chazeh legufeh lidmeh chazeh la pukeh hachad la lidmeh chazeh vela legufeh chazeh. Because an animal that has a blemish when the Bet HaMikdash is up, although it cannot be used itself for its body to sacrifice it, but it can be used for its monetary value. One can sell it and use the money in order to buy a proper sacrificial animal. But in this case, when you have a consecrated animal, when there's no Bet HaMikdash, so it cannot be used not as itself as a sacrifice and not even for its monetary value. What are you going to do with the money? You can't use it to buy another animal. And so, therefore, the prohibition of adding a blemish to another blemish does not apply midoraita when there's no Bet HaMikdash, and that's why Rava says, oh, it's still a problem because it's nir'eh. It still doesn't look right, a d'Rabbanan concern. Ashkeche Rabbi Yona Rabbi Ilai deka'eh apitcha desor. Amar le katane behema te'aker. Ayaved mai. Rabbi Yona found Rabbi Ilai that when he was standing at the entrance of the city of Sor, and he says, okay, I know the law that says that if you consecrate an animal, then it has to be uprooted by making it starve to death. But what about if one consecrates a slave? Now what? The consecrated slave, and there's no Bet HaMikdash. What are you going to do with it? Do you have to maim him, kill him, starve him? We don't know. Now, if it's a Jewish slave, then I'm not asking about that. Obviously, you're not going to harm a Jewish slave. What about a non-Jewish slave? Tanya, this is why you're asking. We already have a baraita. We can figure out the answer from a baraita that says goyim and shepherds of small domesticated animals, they were taken to be thieves because they would allow their sheep to go and graze on other people's land. So these people, these problematic people, what are we going to do with them? Well, we can't lower them into a pit and actively kill them. But if they fall into a pit on their own, we don't have to save them. So that's the same idea that this Eved who is consecrated, so we don't do anything. We do not harm them. We may not save them. We don't have to go out of our way, but no, we don't actively harm them. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zara katane lukhin mehen behema abadim ushvachot Eved Yisrael or dilma afilu Eved goy. Now going back to the second baraita, that was the more lenient baraita. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zara. It says one is permitted to buy animals, slaves, and maidservants. When it says that you can buy avadim in the marketplace of idolatry because you're redeeming them, you're saving property that will now belong to Jews, what kind of slave is it talking about? A Jewish slave or even a non-Jewish slave? So he answered, it makes sense, it should be a Jewish slave. A Jewish slave is a Jew who's owned, is being sold on the slave market, so that would certainly be a mitzvah to redeem him and buy him and get him out of the hands of non-Jews, for sure. So it makes sense that it would be an Eved Yisrael, because if it was a non-Jewish slave, what do you need him for? Why are you going to go and give money to idolaters in order to redeem a non-Jewish slave? What benefit are you getting? What benefit is it doing? You can benefit. You're getting a slave, but you're not allowed to benefit from idolatry only if it's for an overriding reason, like redeeming the land of Israel or redeeming a Jew. But a non-Jewish slave, what is the mitzvah that would be involved? כי אתה רבין אמר בי שמעון ben Lakish אפילו עבד גוי, מפני שמכניסו תחת כנפי השכינה. However, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said in the name of Resh Lakish, even if it's a non-Jewish slave, one can go to these markets and buy him, because thereby one is bringing him under the wings of the Shekhinah, because an Eved Kena'ani, a non-Jewish slave, once he becomes owned by a Jew, undergoes partial conversion, and eventually, if he's freed, is a full convert. Even while he's a Eved Kanani, he's following some mitzvot, and so that itself is a mitzvah. Amar Rav Ashi, tu behema, mai machnis tachat kanfei shechina ika. So Rav Ashi says, yeah, but the Beraita says that one can also buy animals in these idolatrous marketplaces. So what about the animal? You're going to convert the animal and it's going to come under the wings of the Shekhinah. So that reason doesn't apply to animals, and yet animals also one can buy. Rather, it's because one is reducing the possession of the non-Jews, and here also with the regarding a slave, one is reducing it from them. Generally, in these marketplaces, things were sold at a good price for sale, and so therefore these non-Jews, they need money, and so by being able to go and buy it and give them money, one can take more of their property, so kind of redeeming the property that was once belonged to Goyim and now putting it in the hands of Jews, whether it's being converted or not converted, even for an animal. All these do have that overriding benefit, and so are permitted. Rabbi Yaakov zeban sandela. Rabbi Yirmiyah zeban pita. Rabbi Yaakov bought sandals at such a market, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bought bread at such a market. Amar le'echad lechabre yatma abad rabba chachi. One of them said to the other, "You orphan," not literally an orphan, but orphan because what? You have no teacher. Would your teacher do this and buy sandals? And the other one said the same thing to the other. Amar le'idach yatma abad rabba chachi. You're an orphan. Would your teacher have done this? So each one's accusing the other, even though they did the same thing. Actually, each one of them bought from a homeowner. And remember, homeowners don't pay tax to the idolatrous government. So therefore, buying from a homeowner is okay. But each one thought that the other one bought from a merchant, and the merchants do pay tax to the idolaters. So each one says, yeah, listen, I bought from a homeowner, but you must have bought from a marketplace. So, hey, would your teacher have done that? So each one accused the other, even though actually both of them were doing something okay. As Abba said, that one is prohibited from buying from non-Jews only if one is buying from, in an idolatrous context, only if one is buying from a merchant, because then the merchant is paying tax to the idolatrous priests, and then you're participating in that. But if you're buying from a homeowner, an individual, there's no sales tax, and therefore that's permitted. So they were both doing a permitted way. Amar Rabbi Abba Rabbi Achia Baraba Ilma Lehaya Rabbi Yochanan Ha Zimna Be'atra Deka Shekli Michsa Afin Balabayit Hava Asar. But now we update the law. Rabbi Abba, son of Rabbi Achia Baraba, says if Rabbi Yochanan were here at this time and a place where the taxes are taken from everything, even from a homeowner, so then he surely would have prohibited buying things even from a homeowner. And those times changed, and the authorities realized this loophole. They said, no, homeowners have to pay tax also. He would have prohibited it. So how could these sages have bought from homeowners? Because at this time, even homeowners, according to this statement, were getting taxed. So how could they buy their pita and their sandals? Oh, they bought it from homeowners who do not regularly sell. So taxes were only taken from homeowners who sell on a regular basis. You had the official stores that had they have a stall in the marketplace, and also some people that have stores in their home and they regularly sell. Those would be taxed. But a homeowner just has one item. He has I have extra sandals here. I have some extra bread. I made some bread. I have some extra, and so they don't regularly sell it. Those would not be taxed. And both of these sages bought from homeowners who only sold temporarily, and that's why it was permitted. Baruch Adonai Leolam.